Brad and I have been at a bar, at the same bar, and not known each other was there for an hour just because we couldn't see 10 feet away to know.
But then I hear his voice, and it stands out pretty well. Brian and I have a disease called Stargardt's disease. It's a form of macular degeneration. The way Stargardt's works is it affects your central vision, and your peripheral vision is usually held intact.
For two blind brothers, as you can imagine, look and feel are two very different things to us. We wanted these shirts to be as comfortable, as fantastic to wear. I don't wear anything else at this point.
We've created this clothing company to raise awareness and bring funds to this cause. We take no salaries out of the company. We let all proceeds drop to medical research to cure these diseases.
What Brad and I want to do with this company is give you somebody to look up to, give you somebody to talk to. I've had a brother my whole life who can help me get through my problems. I know things are possible because he's accomplished them. How do you read a menu every day? And he'll tell me, oh, I take a picture on my iPhone and then I zoom in on it. Should I play this sport? And he said, yeah, you know, the worst comes to worst, you're just bad at it. And then you go do something else. And that happened a lot.
We've taken all of our network, our experts in design, in production, in fabric, to create what we think is the perfect shirt. We are on the cusp of gene therapies and stem cell therapies that are going to revolutionize medicine. Not just in eye disease, it's already happening. Right now, it's not a question of the science, it's a question of the funds to get through these clinical trials and to get research to commercialization opportunities.
Brad and Brian, thank you so much for being part of Combat Blindness International's virtual World Sight Day event online.
Well, we're so thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for having us.
So we are really honored that you could join us. So let's get started. I just think the story of your clothing company, Two Blind Brothers, is so interesting, and it has its roots in your childhood. Tell us about when you both learned that you had the condition called Stargardt's disease. Did I pronounce it right?
You did, and this is Brad. I'm the older brother, and so my experience came about 5 years before Brian. When I was 5 years old, I failed the kindergarten eye chart, and up till that point, I don't think that my parents knew that I had a condition. And the way Stargardt's works is it's a form of macular degeneration. So I think for the most part that degeneration hadn't really started. And so after that, my mom took me to a series of doctors, and we ended up, after sort of a year and a half, walking into this doctor's office. I remember they needed to dye my blood. I forget how you say it, like the flangioangiogram or whatever it is. I probably butchered that, but it dyes your blood, and then they could see the scar tissue on my retina, and that's when they knew I had Stargardt's disease. And I remember at that moment that my mom basically shrunk because the doctor said that this was an incurable eye disease. It degenerates over time. They didn't know how dramatic it would be or how fast it would be. You should really go talk to a blind and visually impaired, orientation and mobility specialist, and get some magnifiers and learn Braille, and best of luck. And, that moment really started what Brian and I consider one of our greatest gifts, which was our parents' perspective and our parents' attitude towards this. Because we got in the car after that appointment, and I was so young, I didn't really know how to interpret it. I was 7 years old at that time. And my mom looked at me and said, F this. And I and she goes, let's go get some ice cream and rent a movie. And so we went to Friendly's, the ice cream shop. And that's for a long time, that's what I thought F this actually meant. And then we went to Blockbuster, and I just remember eating ice cream, watching Airbud, the movie about the dog that could shoot 3 pointers, thinking that this was like the best day ever.
That's amazing. I mean, you have to give parents a lot of credit. That's beautiful that she saw it as not something negative, but something positive. So fast forward, it's May 2016, and you founded Two Blind Brothers. How did this come about?
Yeah, so you have to go back a little before May because we launched in May, but probably about 6 months earlier, Brad and I were walking around New York City and we went into a Bloomingdale's. Brad said I dressed terribly, and so I needed to update my wardrobe or he wouldn't hang out with me anymore. I think that was his exact wording. The love of an older brother is timeless and endless. But so we walk into this Bloomingdale's, and if you've ever been shopping with somebody who's visually impaired, or if you're visually impaired yourself, it's a huge nightmare. You basically walk around, and when you have to take a picture of a label to figure out if the shirt is the right size, if it's the right color, if it's a brand or the price point you want. So what we do is we walk around and feel everything like we're 5 years old. And on this fateful day, Brad and I lost each other in the store, and we walked out probably about 45 minutes later with the exact same shirt. And after kind of laughing and playing some rock, paper, scissors to see who had to return it, because at that time, we can't dress alike. We're not, you don't want to look like twins. I don't want to look like Brad in any situation. But we end up but then we had this kind of lightning bolt moment that we could make very soft clothing because we had this diligence to touch, because the reason we bought that shirt is it was so incredibly soft and comfortable that we were willing to do the research to find out if we actually wanted it. So that was part one. And part two was that there was a drug that was coming through clinical trials at that moment for a disease called Leber congenital amaurosis, which basically takes kids who have been diagnosed with LCA, this disease. They go blind by the age of 5 or 6. But if they get this drug at any point, if they have this specific gene mutation, they have sight again. They go from reading Braille to reading text. And we've met some families that have been the beneficiary of this drug, and it is miraculous that these kids, basically the lights flip back on. It's truly almost magic. And so Brad and I were talking about how exciting this was and how, the research was really coming to fruition. And we had bought this super soft shirt, and we said, well, maybe there's something to this. Maybe we can start a clothing company where we focus on making the softest shirts in the world. And then we give 100% of the profits back to these early stage retinal researchers to try and help accelerate this process for a cure, as well as build as much awareness as we can around this idea of visual impairment. And we started with lowly aspirations. I think we had some friends that worked in the industry, so they helped us find a manufacturer and helped us source our fabrics. And make the long story short, we made about 200 shirts, and we're like, this will probably cover us for the entire life of the business.
You've taken something that might be perceived as a barrier and turned it into a strength. That is incredibly empowering for you and for others. In many ways, Combat Blindness International, we also look at this idea of empowering others. You're talking about you as a child and being able to have that strength to talk to your teacher and because you had the support around you that's empowered you to do so. In our work, we really try to empower others, especially those that are, economically challenged. Do you see yourselves as empowering other people to rise to new challenges? For example, finding a cure for blindness or overcoming other types of barriers. Um, I know one of the things I read about you is that the people that work in your factory are on the blindness spectrum.
I'll never forget the first time that all this dawned on us was a man who lived like 45 miles outside of Albuquerque. He had been visually impaired his whole life. He had basically, he said to us that he had isolated himself from so many people because he was kind of ashamed of his visual impairment. But then when he went and saw our video and saw the hundreds of comments of people like him, it motivated him to reach out to the kind of local groups that for visually impaired people around him, that he had gone to a few meetings and that he was actually putting himself out there again. And when you get that kind of message on just a project, you realize that you have a much larger responsibility than just making shirts. Brad and I, for better or for worse, had to be as the best champions for this community as we possibly could be.
So one of the things that we talk about at Combat Blindness is that we really are trying to level the playing field for people who can't afford or don't have access to eye care. We really, a core mission of ours is, as I mentioned before, equity. By giving 100% of your profits to research, researching cures for blindness, you're making the world a more equitable place, aren't you?
In terms of leveling the playing field, one of the things that gets us very fired up is the fact that because of the attention, we'll get these messages from families or individuals. And it's interesting because it's almost like Brian and I get to kind of peer back in time to when we were first diagnosed and to see how important it was for us to have the parents, the resources, the vision teachers, the technology around us that let us become who we are today. And the fact that we live in an age where technology and those resources are constantly leveling the playing field. It's our big contention, and it's a real personal mission of ours to explain to people that you cannot let blindness or vision impairment become a psychological impairment. What we are just big proponents of is understanding that there are challenges in life, but your great purpose can be embracing those challenges and fighting for an even better future. And that's one of the obvious overlaps with what you guys embrace.
Yeah, we've really tried to look at the idea that, people in the US or other high income countries have those resources, but people in places, rural communities in India or Africa or South America don't always have those resources. There aren't really disability or schools for the blind or other resources. And so we really hope that the work that we do sets someone on a path where they can go back to work, go back to school, and achieve those dreams that they have for themselves.
Yeah, I want to touch on one
Yeah,
thing. Or you just reminded me of something.
yeah.
I had the chance to go to India, and I was talking to we were doing sort of a small interview. I was on there for a vacation, but we were doing kind of an interview on the Two Blind Brothers project. And Brian and I and a lot of us here, we have such a skewed perspective because it is such a different problem in different countries. And one of the things that I thought was so interesting that the Indian reporter was saying is they were saying that India has a third of all the world's blind.
Hmm.
And she was really asking a lot of questions about why my brother and I would name our company Two Blind Brothers and put ourselves out there as individuals who have visual and challenges, because in India, and at least from her perspective, that was probably one of the worst ways you could possibly brand yourself, period. And it was kind of a wake up call. It was really kind of perspective shifting, because it just reminds you that a lot of the world is not as fortunate as we are, and a lot of people with vision challenges in those places aren't as fortunate as we are.
Absolutely. Well, at the end of the day, it's why we do what we do, so that we can help whoever we can help, and move the needle forward in terms of uh, curing blindness, avoidable blindness, and doing research so that we have these new cures for blindness. So, I'm just amazed at the this appeal that this company has. And did how does it feel knowing that every time someone buys your shirt, a shirt or a piece of clothing or whatever it might be, that you're helping make a difference in someone's life or towards a cure?
When you say it that way, it feels a lot better, because when I think about shirts being sold, I'm like, oh God, do we have enough buttons? Like, did we place the button order? And that's, it's funny how quickly you get absorbed into the minutia of the work rather than the grand goal. But, it's, to answer your question, there's always you get those moments of elation, and Brad and I try to take as much time as we can to, and I think a lot of people forget to do this, to take moments to be grateful and proud and happy of the accomplishments as you set goals for the future. And we have these moments where we get to high five when we get to make a big donation to the foundation fighting blindness, or when we get to talk to a Perkins School for the Blind, or do a great podcast interview, or be able to directly impact people's lives. Because as Brad said earlier, research is so amorphic that sometimes it's hard to get super jazzed up about something that'll come to fruition in 15 years. But when you get to talk to a kid, and a young visually impaired kid, as Brad said, go back in time for a minute and give them some advice and get them excited about being visually impaired, that's the best day that you can have. That's when it's really super rewarding. And I know when we've from being able to actually like see a shirt on a person I don't know was maybe like the happiest day of the Two Blind Brothers project. I was eating barbecue in Austin, Texas, and this guy probably thought I was a psycho because I came running up covered in sauce and grease. And he's like, okay, my wife got me the shirt. You don't need to take the picture. I was like, we have to do this. But those moments are always great, but it's really when you get to connect with somebody one-on-one that it really feels super special.
So before we finish up, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience?
I actually have one thing in reference to what you just said. I'm going to overcut Brad, hopefully to take what he was going to say. No, but
what Brian is about to say is going to be the most profound thing I've ever heard. It's going to knock you out of your seat. I can already tell.
Everyone, please sit down, because I don't want any fainting head injuries after this knowledge is laid upon you. No, to what you just said about social entrepreneurship and the interests, I always love highlighting this to people. Brad and I started this business with 200 shirts in a video by a Starbucks barista, with no grand aspirations. We didn't mortgage our house. We didn't we didn't burn the ships, as they sometimes say. It's very possible, if you have a passion and you have something that you truly care about and a cause that you want to give back to, you can start that business pretty easily. And it's going to be a ton of work. It may not be successful. It may not work at all. But if Brad and I's story can inspire 1,000 other Two Blind Brothers for any number of diseases or whatever people care most about, that's when our business actually will deem it very successful. because we can do everything we can to give back to vision impairment, but there's so many causes. And if we can create that multiplicative effect by the person listening right now, going and saying, I'm actually going to take a crack at this, then that's when we've really, truly won. And we just want everyone who has that passion, who has that care, who really believes, to go out and at least try, because you can make a giant difference and it can work like it did for Brad and I.
I think one of the incredible things that, Combat Blindness International has are the narratives of the people that you're helping. And I think when someone hears a story about somebody who had no resources, no vision, and no hope in a country that is maybe has less resources than this one, and you go in with an affordable, safe, quick procedure and give them their eyesight back, that lets them see their kids, get employed, reach, rejoin society in some cases. Not only them, but the person who was responsible for caretaking for them. I mean, there are real deep, emotional and powerful stories in there. And, just encouraging, you guys to continue to share those. And that is what we find lets us grow these communities, is by lifting up those stories that really speak to us. There's a great quote, the more personal, the more universal.
Mm-hmm.
And you all have a great asset, which are the incredible lives that you've helped facilitate.
Well, thank you so much, Brian and Brad. We're just so grateful. Thank you for sharing your time with us, and for you making such a big difference in people's lives through your company, Two Blind Brothers. So I want to let everyone know, please check out twoblindbrothers.com. Their clothes are beautiful, soft, amazing, and they're actually quite stylish too. And again, 100% of their profits of your purchase will go towards funding blindness research. So thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for tuning in, everybody at home.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for dealing with Brian.
Way to end it on a high note, brother.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.